Chapter 73 of the Old Curiosity Shop. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recorded by Mill Nicholson. The Old Curiosity Shop by Charles Dickens. Chapter 73. The magic reel, which, rolling on before, has led the chronicler thus far, now slackens in its pace and stops. It lies before the goal. The pursuit is at an end. It remains but to dismiss the leaders of the little crowd who have borne us company upon the road, and so to close the journey. Foremost among them, smooth Sampson Brass and Sally, arm in arm, claim our polite attention. Mr Sampson, then, being detained, as already has been shown, by the justice upon whom he called, and being so strongly pressed to protract his stay that he could by no means refuse, remained under his protection for a considerable time, during which the great attention of his entertainer kept him so extremely close that he was quite lost to society, and never even went abroad for exercise, saving into a small paved yard. So well, indeed, was his modest and retiring temper understood by those with whom he had to deal, and so jealous were they of his absence, that they required a kind of friendly bond to be entered into by two substantial housekeepers, in the sum of £1,500 apiece, before they would suffer him to quit their hospitable roof, doubting, it appeared, that he would return, if once let loose, on any other terms. Mr Brass, struck with the humour of this jest, and carrying out its spirit to the utmost, sought from his wide connection a pair of friends whose joint possessions fell some halfpence short of 15 pence, and proffered them as bail, for that was the merry word agreed upon both sides. These gentlemen being rejected after 24 hours' pleasantry, Mr Brass consented to remain, and did remain, until a club of choice spirits, called a grand jury, who were in the joke, summoned him to trial before 12 other wags for perjury and fraud, who in their turn found him guilty with a most facetious joy. Nay, the very populace entered into the whim, and when Mr Brass was moving in a hackney coach towards the building where these wags assembled, saluted him with rotten eggs and carcasses of kittens, and feigned to wish to tear him into shreds, which greatly increased the comicality of the thing, and made him relish it the more, no doubt. To work this sportive vein still further, Mr Brass, by his counsel, moved in arrest of judgment that he had been led to criminate himself, by assurances of safety and promises of pardon, and claimed the leniency which the law extends to such confiding natures as are thus deluded. After solemn argument, this point, with others of a technical nature whose humorous extravagance it would be difficult to exaggerate, was referred to the judges for their decision, Sampson being meantime removed to his former quarters. Finally, some of the points were given in Sampson's favour, and some against him, and the upshot was that, instead of being desired to travel for a time in foreign parts, he was permitted to grace the mother country under certain insignificant restrictions. These were, that he should, for a term of years, reside in a spacious mansion, where several other gentlemen were lodged and boarded at the public charge, who went, clad in a sober uniform of grey turned up with yellow, had their hair cut extremely short, and chiefly lived on gruel and light soup. It was also required of him that he should partake of their exercise of constantly ascending an endless flight of stairs, and, lest his legs, unused to such exertion, should be weakened by it, that he should wear upon one ankle an amulet or charm of iron. These conditions being arranged, he was removed one evening to his new abode, and enjoyed, in common with 9 other gentlemen and 2 ladies, the privilege of being taken to his place of retirement in one of royalty's own carriages. Over and above these trifling penalties, his name was erased and blotted out from the roll of attorneys, which erasure has been always held in these latter times to be a great degradation and reproach, and to imply the commission of some amazing villainy, as indeed it would seem to be the case, when so many worthless names remain among its better records, unmolested. Of Sally Brass, conflicting rumours went abroad. Some said with confidence that she had gone down to the docks in male attire, and had become a female sailor. Others darkly whispered that she had enlisted as a private in the 2nd Regiment of Foot Guards, and had been seen in uniform and on duty, to wit, leaning on her musket and looking out of a sentry box in St James's Park one evening. There were many such whispers as these in circulation, but the truth appears to be that, after the lapse of some 5 years, during which there is no direct evidence of her having been seen at all, 2 wretched people were more than once observed to crawl at dusk from the inmost recesses of St Giles's, and to take their way along the streets with shuffling steps and cowering, shivering forms, looking into the roads and kennels as they went in search of refuse food or disregarded offal. These forms were never beheld but in those nights of cold and gloom, when the terrible spectres, who lie at all other times in the obscene hiding places of London, in archways, dark vaults, and cellars, venture to creep into the streets, the embodied spirits of disease and vice and famine. It was whispered by those who should have known that these were Sampson and his sister Sally, and to this day, it is said, they sometimes pass, on bad nights, in the same loathsome guise, close at the elbow of the shrinking passenger. The body of Quilp being found, though not until some days had elapsed, an inquest was held on it near the spot where it had been washed ashore. The general supposition was that he had committed suicide, and, this appearing to be favoured by all the circumstances of his death, the verdict was to that effect. He was left to be buried, with a stake through his heart, in the centre of 4 lonely roads. It was rumoured afterwards that this horrible and barbarous ceremony had been dispensed with, and that the remains had been secretly given up to Tom Scott. But even here opinion was divided, for some said Tom dug them up at midnight and carried them to a place indicated to him by the widow. It is probable that both these stories may have had their origin in the simple fact of Tom's shedding tears upon the inquest, which he certainly did, extraordinary as it may appear. He manifested besides a strong desire to assault the jury, and being restrained and conducted out of court, darkened its only window by standing on his head upon the sill, until he was dexterously tilted upon his feet again by a cautious beadle. Being cast upon the world by his master's death, he determined to go through it upon his head and hands, and accordingly began to tumble for his bread. Finding, however, his English birth an insurmountable obstacle to his advancement in this pursuit, notwithstanding that his art was in high repute and favour, he assumed the name of an Italian image lad with whom he had become acquainted, and afterwards tumbled with extraordinary success and to overflowing audiences. Little Mrs Quilp never quite forgave herself the one deceit that lay so heavy on her conscience, and never spoke or thought of it but with bitter tears. Her husband had no relations, and she was rich. He had made no will, or she would probably have been poor. Having married the first time at her mother's instigation, she consulted in her second choice nobody but herself. It fell upon a smart young fellow enough, and as he made it a preliminary condition that Mrs Jiniwin should be thenceforth an out-pensioner, they lived together after marriage with no more than the average amount of quarrelling, and led a merry life upon the dead dwarf's money. Mr and Mrs Garland and Mr Abel went out as usual, except that there was a change in their household, as will be seen presently, and in due time the latter went into partnership with his friend the notary, on which occasion there was a dinner and a ball and great extent of dissipation. Unto this ball there happened to be invited the most bashful young lady that was ever seen, with whom Mr Abel happened to fall in love. How it happened, or how they found it out, or which of them first communicated the discovery to the other, nobody knows, but certain it is that in course of time they were married, and equally certain it is that they were the happiest of the happy, and no less certain it is that they deserved to be so. And it is pleasant to write down that they reared a family, because any propagation of goodness and benevolence is no small addition to the aristocracy of nature, and no small subject of rejoicing for mankind at large. The pony preserved his character for independence and principle down to the last moment of his life, which was an unusually long one, and caused him to be looked upon, indeed, as the very old Pa of ponies. He often went to and fro with the little phaeton between Mr Garland's and his son's, and, as the old people and the young were frequently together, had a stable of his own at the new establishment, into which he would walk of himself with surprising ease.